talk of Tim Alonso at 1 p.m. It's going to be available here too, so if the other room is full, you can come over here. There's going to be audio and everything here, so if you do not want to go over to the other room, you don't need to move. So I'm going to give the floor to Dani to let him tell us about his stuff. Good morning. There are more people than I expected, considering it's Saturday morning. Just out of curiosity, how many of you are here because you know what I'm going to be talking about? Because I decided what I was going to talk about yesterday evening, so you will excuse me because I'm a bit nervous. So please bear with me. And I use very strong language, so I apologize for that beforehand. So don't bring me to meet your children. So what am I going to talk about? Crawlino. I've called it the next level of the crawling systems because I think it sounds nice. Maybe I don't have batteries for this stuff. This was working a minute ago.
Ay, que se tiene. Ah, vale, no, que es al revés. Bien.
Oh, it works the other way around. Sorry, I am a bit nervous. I don't like the CV thing so much, but everybody tells about themselves, and so as a quick summary about myself, I do hacking tools, I do security research, ethical hacking. I am chapter leader of OWASP Madrid, and I work in BBVA Labs. It's a place where we can think our own stuff, and they allow us to publish that. And these are my social networks if you want to follow me. The easy version to remember that is to write cr0hn in Google, and everything that comes up is about me. So what's this talk about? This is an important question, and when I was planning, I thought, how am I going to explain it? Of course, it's about crawlers, so let's see what's special about this. I always like to say at the beginning, I always like to see what Wikipedia says about whatever we're going to talk about. And Wikipedia says that a web crawler, sometimes called a spider, is an internet bot that systematically browses the World Wide Web, typically for the purpose of web indexing. So that's what I keep. The only thing I keep from this is World Wide Web and web indexing. So this came up in a personal project, and I decided I wanted more. Have you done crawlers ever? That's why you're here, because you've suffered this. So what's the state of the art of current crawlers? They are painstaking frameworks. You need to be able to program, which seems obvious, but not so much. They're only available for web, and they are terrible to maintain. These are the usual frameworks. The Java ones, and Scrappy, which is Python. This is the Python, Scrappy Python. I began with Python, so I have a feeling for that, and this is the Java one, which is still horrible, even more horrible. So with that context, this is what happens to me when I want to program a crawler. I get all tense because however much you reuse, you have to program forever. And precisely because of that, I said, I don't like these rules. So I'm going to make up new rules. And Benderina is going to tell us about what the new rules are. These rules I've made up. So, which were the ones that I wanted to have? Well, programming should be optional. Why do you have to know how to program to do a crawler? And a crawler should not only be available for the web, because the concept of a crawler or spider is something that it can crawl through things, the white or the black internet. Why only the web? And maintainability. Have you ever seen? I don't know what to call it, like a meme or a quote that has a counter 201, and it says, when I wrote this code, only God and myself knew what I meant, and now only God knows it. So, however long you live, you should be able to maintain it, and do not reinvent the wheel, which seems obvious, but not so obvious in the end. So what do I mean when I talk about changing the rules? Well, programming. I wish that what initially is programming should become a YAML file and a crawler that's not on the web, that can go through internet, but why not go further and do tracing in an SSH or an Apache or the brokering systems or whatever? I believe that we shouldn't care about what we're doing, whatever we want to crawl. Maintainability, well, for it to be legible, because even if you have good programming practices, sometimes there's not much more you can do about it. You can think about saving paper, but it's better to consider that it's good to be able to understand it a month later, and then easy to learn. You shouldn't have to struggle so hard to learn it, and so that in 2 months' time you have not forgotten what it is about. I don't know if you've seen this before. He forgets about how to sit, and we want to forget this type of, or avoid this type of thing. And what do I mean when I say we do not want to reinvent the wheel? Well, we have a number of definition files. Why not do a number of parts that we can assemble, like a Frankenstein robot, and generate our final crawler or motion? So for you to have a context about the ideas and the whys is why Crawlino came about. So what is Crawlino? It is a crawling developed from scratch. And people have asked me, haven't you used this and that? And no, because if I don't want to do again what the frameworks do, I want to get rid of everything, and it has to meet the 4 rules that I've thought up. So you might find this exciting, like I do. Another definition, and this is one that I've made up, although it's in inverted comma. A student life that allows us to develop tools and automation using files for rules definition. But anyway, what do I mean with all this? So I need to make some introductions because Crawlino is not only a project, but I wanted Crawlino to be something else beyond the project and the code that I will tell you about briefly. I wanted to be something really nice, and this gentleman is Crawlino. And this is the official logo of Crawlino, the one that will be published in your hub. And you'll say, why this elderly gentleman with his walking stick? Because in my head, Crawlino is an elderly gentleman from a tiny village, and he bits things up, and things come up the way he wants them. So somebody like this, similar to this gentleman. Have you never seen this gentleman in the village saying, where are you, young man, going? That's the way I picture Crawlino. So this is the official logo of your hub. Do not go in yet because the organization is there, but not. It's not ready. And I will announce, let you know when it's ready. So having introduced the main characters, I want to make a disclaimer. It's an alpha, which is a way of saying, if it fails, I warn you. Gmail had it for 11 years, so it's also good for me. And I'm going to use the head as a logo. So 4 rules, and what's this for? A very quick summary. We have a definition file that we have already seen that does things. Yeah, it is a bit simplified, but slowly. So we have the configuration files, we have the engine, which is the one that executes things, and Crawlino has been devised in a very modular way, so everything's a plugin. And you will see what I mean. One example of a real crawler. This is a real crawler for Crawlino. So how do we read this? We have a first part, and we can explain this in more detail, don't worry. In sources, you say, where do you want to get the information from? How do I want to get it? And what is it that I want to extract? But it's a YAML. These are the famous configuration YAMLs. But before we continue, I've shown you the file, the YAML file, so that you don't become impatient, but we need a few more concepts. What I call steps. We have the where, how, and what. But we need more questions. In which way? What or how I retain what I retain, and how I react. So in Crawlino lingo, in which way is configuration, in where is sources, as you've seen in the YAML file, how is inputs, what are the extractors, which are the mechanisms to extract information, how or where I retain something. Well, it's very easy if you want to do it dumping in the same process. And how do I react is what I've called hooks. When you find a piece of data, what do you want to do with it? So it's quite straightforward. Being a bit more specific, configuration, sources, input. I'm going to give you an example. A user enumeration. Configuration doesn't matter so much because it's global, but the sources could be a URL like the one we've seen. The input is a web, so we want to act in that way. The information extraction, it could be a regex that I'm finding to 100. So authentication has been successful model. As you obtain information to be automatically dumped in Mongo. And then when you're done, send me an email. Another one, well, could be, in this case, the open socket for the input, the extractor, finding the port status open. And I think this one is better, the exploitation of vulnerabilities. The source would be my web server, a domain. It's the input. The extractors want to get the Apache specific version. But look at this. The hook is launch Metasploit. So you can take any action you want. They're free. But see how simple it is to do an enumeration or a port scanning or an exploration. Pretty much everything fits in this sequence of steps. So Crawlino has been programmed in Python 3.6.1, pip install Crawlino, and usage, it has 3 configuration parameters. I have 10 demos and I have 34 minutes. I hope I don't do a cyber camp. Those of you who were there will know what I mean, because none of them worked. So it was a bit complicated to deal with. So what I'm going to do, we're going to write our first crawler in a super simple way, but to apply the concept to a more real case. We give it a name and a description and tags. And why do we want to give it tags? Because one of the main ideas of Crawlino, although I will summarize that at the end, why not do a centralized repository of crawlers and a line of commands of look me up this crawler. That's why we have that information here. We could leave that out, but I include it so that you think about this. The sources, a web page. Input is the web, and in how I obtain the data, well, then we decide. So in each one of the phases, when you look at the types, you're talking about plugins. That's why we can have the plugins in one side, but the definition part should be completely decoupled.
¿Qué método quiero? Pues bueno, un get y que...
So I think it's pretty obvious. The method is get, and the URL that I want to get, ID equals to 1. So how do you execute this? Well, it's very simple. I've done 2 small servers. One is the dummy site Davis, and the other one is it simulates an authentication. So the dummy site IDS, when you give it an ID different from 9, but when it's 9, it tells you you found it. Okay, demo time. You cannot tell, but I'm actually scared. So we launch the dummy server. How nice the sound of the keys. And Crawlino, we execute it without commands, and it says, do you see it well, or do you want it bigger? You're not as blind as I am. So this was the example 001, and it's done the request. ID equals 1, so we've made 1 request. So step 1, it's worked, and we haven't had to type any code. I don't know if you've seen that ID equal ones contributes nothing to me. I would like to generate data. I'd like to be able to define in Crawlino somehow that rather than 1, give me a value from 0 to 40, or take this word list and plug it in. That would be great. Well, those are the generators. By default, Crawlino brings in 4 types of generators for random text from numeric ranges, specific values, that is 24 to 53, and the word list that you tell it. So far, there are 5 internal word lists, but if you give it a path, it can load it in the same way. So what is a generator? I don't like to call it meta language because that's an offense for the ones who do programming language. But look at the point, dollar symbol, generator, numeric, word string and values, and the parameters of the generator. Here we're saying values from 1 to 10. Execute, just like in the other one. We continue with the dummy server. And we begin with the 002. So if we're going to generate values from 1 to 2, obviously, we need to see several requests for obvious reasons. And yes, from 1 to 9. We are computer guys, so it's n minus 1. How absurd, how simple. We have generated values. Something important about generators, you can have generators all over the place, but it's very, very important because although I am a Python programmer, I am obsessed with optimization, which is a bit of a contradiction, I know. But since I cannot do more with the Python engine, at least the generator do not preload the 100 or 1,000,000 elements in the memory, but it only preloads 1. So doing the whole combination of generators barely uses memory. So, because if you load up the whole dictionary, then you run out of memory, and it's quite a mess. So we're going to do a longer one. We're going to combine 2 generators. One will continue to doing the IDs from 1 to 10. And we're also going to introduce the ENG to introduce a random text of 20 characters long. Not a very radical change. And how are we going to do that? We're going to have a net cut, because otherwise I won't be able to see it properly. So it has to cover all the requests in netcat in a sequential way. I think I'm actually going to finish on time. I'm amazed. So the host. So how does it do the elements combinatory? It's sequential. It's one after the other. So the combinatory, if you look at this, the second generator parameter is 20. So we're asking it to generate up to 20 elements. Why? Because if we generate up to 10 in one place and 20, we're actually, it's a matricial operation. So it's 20 by 10 in order to get the whole combinatory. So we're done. Do we stay here in Madrid, Chino Chano, sort of step by step? Sometimes I ask myself these questions. So this is very slow. but Crawlino can also work in parallel, but not in a concurrent way, okay? Are there Python programmers in the room? Raise your hands, okay? Have you ever struggled with threads and you hate them? Yeah, you should. In Python, even if it's an off-topic, threads are a lie, and even if you program with threads, only one is executed at the same time. So why did they do it? I don't know. So how does this, because this works internally with threads, it is not implemented with threads, but with processes, and that's why I say execution is parallel. Every time you launch Crawlino in processes with concurrency or parallelism 10, it means it will do 10 processes simultaneously. So what I'm going to do is to execute the same for you to look at the difference in time, because I haven't measured, but it has taken a while to test the 200. So we're going to use the same command, but concurrence 10. If you see, it's quite faster now, and in fact it's done. So this is a lot more lively. And if you look at the command line, it has the parameter of the environment variable, and that's it. So that's great. We don't want to do a Peter. So let's start with more exciting demos. 23 minutes left. When I was planning this talk, I thought, how can I explain this properly? Because this is actually a complex issue, but I'm going to use examples. So the first option, or the first scenario of what I want to do with Crawlino, that the Soviet domicile IDS will return code 200 in an ID when it's 9. So that's simple, but first I'm going to test with Postman. You all are familiar with Postman, right? It's a silly little program, nothing of the other world. Postman is something that allows us to make requests in a simple way. The URL is the one we were asking earlier on. And we've said this is going to fail because I haven't set up the server. So let me close this, and so when you make the request, it should say not found data for this value. That's what should happen, right? But as I've said, when we get a 9, it should give us the found that we can see here. So I am not lying to you. Unless this is a video, of course. But don't worry, I'm not so smart. So we've tested it with Postman. So how do we rewrite this crawler? The generator is in the same way, but we add another label, the extractors. And although you see a lot of writing, it's all quite consistent. So I want to do a rule set. The name is going to be rule 1, a description, because of what I've said, because you can reuse rules from somebody else's. Map 2, I will explain that later. Input var, status code. Between phases, what happens is that the result of one goes on to the next one. So each phase reports in a different way. So the limitation here is that you have to know what phase you come from to know what format reports to you. So in the case of the input web, what goes through is JSON, and one of the values is status quo data. It has all of those parameters. And we want to assess the status quo. So we start defining roles. So far, easy direct is the only one there because I haven't had any time to implement the expand. So we want to apply these rules, type of rules, breakage. We can define an order or not. If we do not have an order, if we do not specify, the rules will be executed in the order in which we've specified them. In the expressions, you can have 1 or n, and these are regex rules. But it's very, very simple. So how do we execute this? Well, we're the way in which we're executing everything else. Look at this. If you see what it's given back, extractor results. So it's found something, and it's, well, it does things, but this result is not really useful for me. So because it's not useful yet, well, I'm gonna. This is the scenario 2, just like in 1, but we wanted to tell us the URL that has made true the expression, because the scenario is very clear. Or when we get to 200, this is what I want to retain. But which request has taken us to the 200? That's what I need. Do you understand what I mean? No good for me to have a list of them all.
Fijaos, el único...
So the only change we make here is in the report. We look at the information we want to transfer to the next stage. So the preset one shows a screen, and here this is not showing the results on normal prep. It's a different stage, and when we want to take to the next stage, instead of the 200 or the expression that you get, we want to do something else. We have the request, the original URL of the request we made. So let's try once again, so that you can see that I'm not lying. There we are. We have the URL that gave us the true condition. Simple. So let's continue. Since that's quite absurd, let's spike it up, and we can do some brute forcing of username and password. We're actually mapping all these positions, but how do we do brute forcing? We use usernames and passwords, and if we get the text authentication, we have to check that until we find it. These are the cases we want to cover. So we're beginning to make different web requests, because the endpoint is quite typical. It could be /out with user, and then with the post in JSON, it says the username and the password. Simple. So what are we going to generate? We want to generate a JSON content type with a post, and these are the data we want to send out. In fact, in the data we have the user admin. And why admin? Well, to have time to see them all. And then the generator are word lists. And there we have a password small, which is integrated, just to check. It's super simple. And what we also want to do is, when we find it, we have there the authentication down. We want to get to the next print stage with the actual data, the actual request, to know which username and password we were checking at that time. Okay, so I'm going to begin with the user auth part, and before, if you allow me, I'm gonna do this. Auth user password Batman. That's a good password actually. Okay, authentication down, and then this one is invalid user and invalid user password. Fair enough. Okay, so let's do the test here. So we're gonna see many requests, but with the post we're not gonna see what we're sending out. But he found it very quickly. User admin password admin. We did a username brute forcing very easily. Super easy. So this is becoming more interesting. But as we saw in this ideas presentation, we still have the web, and I want to do something else. And we want to scan the ports, which is a simple test. So we can do it this way. We have an input, which is a raw socket, and what do we do here? Okay, we generate all the ports of 999 until 10,001. TCP protocol and theme out for obvious reasons. And here's the rule, very simple. We have the raw socket, the format, and that's in the documentation, and one of the parameters you return is the open close status, and one of the things we're looking for is open. So here we're going to put value 7. Okay. This is quite quick. I have port 10,000 open, but if I had 40, we could also map it. And here we have example. And we just did port scanning this way, very simple. We want to detect a Redis server open. I want to have the port open, but I don't have authentication. So which crawler do you need for that? So the crawler really looks like this, because we have the ready 6679 until 80. So what do we need in data? There's a protocol here, and to know whether it's open, we send a network program. If it doesn't respond, the Redis is open. So what do we need to check in return? Well, if the Redis in this command shows information, we look for some value that gives us that info back. And what does it give back? The ready version, and the regular expressions begin more regular and less tacky. We actually have 3 groups of regular expression, Redis version, the version, and when it finishes. So here we can tell Crawlino, okay, out of these ones, are you interested in any group in particular? Would you like me to report the initial expression? We have options to know what we want to report to the next stage. So here we just have the Redis version with the regular expression. We have the report, and we report the group. Which group? Number 2. Okay, let me just check whether this is running. Redis is running here. Eight. Okay. Good. It's done. It's that simple. It's ready, but you can just put your imagination there. We have the ready version. Do you remember what I said about Metasploit? Well, let's continue. Just have 1, 2, 3, 4 demos. And now we can scan the ports and also the network. on a network range. Why not? So how do we do it? So there is what we had as a domain field, an IP, and we can add generators. And we can do it here, and where you see a 0, you can put generators. You can put more than one and chain them up. It will generate all the combination. In phase forward looking, you may have IP generators and other things. And to avoid generators, I create combination. I have the ready port so that it's more simple. Then the regular expression is the same. But if we want, what we want to take to next stage is the host field. What is that? The raw socket gives you the status, the host of where they're making the request, the data, and a few other things. And everything there is in the documents. I'm not making this up. And everything is well explained there. So it's quite absurd, isn't it? Okay. There's no TCP down there, the many requests to the network ranges, and we're just going to see this result. It's saying that here it has found a Redis that meets the conditions that we mentioned earlier with the Redis open. Can we combine different things though? These are isolated cases, but we combine them all into a big case. We want all the versions of the network, and we can do all the combination. Okay. So we have taken a web from socket this way. Very easy. And they're like, no, no. Okay. So the next step is good, but we're still missing something. What is it? To have variables. There are places where I don't want to just show things for the sake of it. I want different things. So these are variables. And since this is a bit of a bore, I have a bad joke. What does a GIF tell JPG? It's the worst joke ever, by the way. He's like, hey, you know, cheer up, get animated. Okay. That just shows that I have no friends, doesn't it? Okay, so I'm going to explain the variables with hooks. And I'm going to explain this with an example. So we want to send an email when we find the Redis open. We can have hooks. So this is how it would look like. I'm ignoring other parts because they're too big, they don't fit the screen. So the structures are the same. And what do we want for the hooks? By default there's an implicit type, which is print. And then we have the Slack. They're all plugins, let's remember. But what do we need? We have the front to subject. We have the body field. And that is the content of the message. And where shall I get it from? We discount it in one place, we're mapping the result. And there we get the result to link it. We don't really know what we want from the former stage. And look, here are the server parameters, the user, the Gmail SMTP and password. By default, if you use a Gmail address, the SMTP and the port are there as well as the TLS. So why the variables? For obvious reasons. Call me weird, but you know, putting there something else makes me feel violent. So since this is just a normal case, what do? We change the command line to this. We can have it with the environment variables or this way. And we have this format, -c, -c, -c. And if I don't want to put my password there, I can also import the environment variables and here we have the password of my email. We have both options there. Okay, let me check. Okay, for the demo we have many factors here. Among them the fact that internet goes well, and so on. It's number 10. Let me check. Oh! Front mail, the command is not right actually. Since I thought, or I knew I was going to be nervous, so I put it here. This is after what we've seen. You send it to cr0hn, or from cr0hn to another account that is mine. You have the environment variable and then the crawler, which is done. Okay, here we are. Okay, here we are. This is all my shit, by the way. So we have it here. I'm not gonna cast anyone. We launch, send. Steve Tethering. Can send it to the email or leave it as the object. And let's see what happens here. Okay. Okay, so here we are. Okay. It's so simple. Without writing any code. But you know, I like writing code, but I'll write it whenever I like it. And that's yet another hook. So simple. Okay, so I'm not going to do a demo on this because only 3 minutes are left, but I've already told you about reusage. And then we have case 8. We can use definitions that someone does crawlers, all of it or a part. So Crawlino embeds that. So how do we do a reusage of a full crawler? We call this base crawler, and we can do another crawler with another metadata and said, okay, this is the original one. So we do care about the other data and we inherit everything. But we only overwrite, we import everything, the inputting everything, but we only overwrite the content type. That's it. So simple. It's cool, isn't it? And you like it? Bastards. Anyway, this is the full crawler. But I may not want the full crawler. Maybe I just want certain parts. Here I have a scanner of port 10,000 by default. They change the target, and here we can import it anywhere, or the other way around. We change the port, and we may have a generic port scaler with certain features. And in mail, this structure will be repeated once again. Okay, so let's import things, whatever we've done before. We may import it in chunks. It's quite comfortable, isn't it? And then we have the reusage. I couldn't think of a better name for this. And why? Because in the gift have organization, one of the things that is most fun here is the catalog. The catalog of full crawlers, partial and even plugins. So why should we do everything? Just do a search and look for a full crawler, which is a network scanner. Maybe someone's done it. So you have Crawlino plugins instant, and that's it. And you either put it on the command line you want to enforce, or you do a stamp on it. But why do we do the same thing once again? It's just silly. Just like with the parsers. You can apply a certain partial, so let's use that one, and the same thing for the plugins. This one uses is just one of my personal goals. So let's do the Metasploit plugin, or OpenBus, or Nexus, or World Destroyer. Someone's written it, why should we do it once again? So the idea is that these should be embedded in everything. And this is it, really. This is a project, this is how it is. I think it's going to look good. So what do I want to do in other versions in the near future? Well, I want to create more plugins, generators, hooks, and so on. And this is my session. I want the Crawler to work in a distributed machine mode. So what does that mean? That everything works as a cluster. Whenever I do a Crawler, instead of every package going to a different process. Can you imagine a cluster of 20 Crawlinos all doing crawling? That's super cool. That was always the aim, but it's like, okay, we have to do that till we give this speech. And you should also have a API server mode, so you can ask questions and automate it. And we have different tracks in this conference, so apart from the API, Crawlino should be able to intercept the hooks and act in accordance. Let's say that you have your GitHub with your private public crawlers, and you have Crawlino in a server mode listening in. So whenever we do a push with a new change in the crawler, it'd be cool for Crawlino to listen in and load all the crawlers. That's the aim. That's why we talk about intercepting the hooks. You have different parts there, as well as a central repository. And these three things will be open for the beta. The beta will come out in about 2 weeks, and you're like, hey, why didn't you publish it today? Because you're going to fill that repo with the report with issues, and now I need to do some tests. I'll publish it in a couple of weeks, send an email to the router list so that you know that you can download it. And finally, to sum up, we have some philosophical conclusions. So things shouldn't make us think too much. If they can work automatically, that's better. And some people say, well, no, crawlers are already invented, everything has been invented, and that's not true. Not everything has been invented, we can still do many things. This is my last slide, by the way. And when you come to a conference, you know it's good to have the project well advanced so you don't miss the first 2 days of the conference like I did. And regarding Crawlino, he's an old fella. He's a young old fella. I'm going to paraphrase a quote by Ernesto Sevilla, the Spanish comedian. Even though there maybe is no up above, you know, the boiling room is quite warm. And I love this gif. I want to be like this guy when I'm old. You know, the master of the place. And this is it. Thank you very much. Okay, so we have time for a brief question. I'll be around anyway if you want to insult me. I do have an advantage because I'm quite close. But it's been a great speech, thank you very much. It's great to have everything so decoupled, it really helps the community doing loads of plugins. And when it comes to letting go of the Crawler information, you're like, we have a model part, and have you not thought about setting up a little server with a Django so you can do data treatment? And in that regard, when we have the rule filters, you can let out information depending on the filter you have, and you can do branches with that. I mean, can you use this as a monitor? And when the filter says this port is broke, for regarding Jungle, you want a hook, basically, with a plugin. This hasn't been done, but it's super easy. Regarding particular things, I'm not saying yes or no, it's been developed, and this could be good, but I need to gauge how well it works. But it's open, and an idea is welcome. So you know, regarding the hooks, I love to have pull records, of course. Well, thank you very much, Dani. Thank you.
It's not like